Greetings, my friends. Welcome to the Let's Get Gritty podcast with Dr. India White. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I know you could have been doing so many other things, but hopefully you'll be able to talk about grit and some other things with me this evening. So, with that said, before we get started, I definitely want to start out by making some announcements to you guys. First off, the Let's Get Gritty podcast, it is going to be featured on Swing Girl Media. Eventually, it will also be featured in other different platforms, including Spotify and whatnot. So keep on the lookout with that. We are still tweaking everything. And if you know a couple things or so and you would like to contribute, feel free to join. Also, I wanted to remind you guys to follow me on social media whenever you get a chance. I would love to have your following. Let's do this. My Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram is Indie238. YouTube is India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. Now, I also want to let you guys know that I have a couple of events coming up, and hopefully I will see you guys in the math space and just in the educational space in general. So I want to share those with you. I will be doing a keynote this week at the NCEMS-F conference in Maryland. That's this weekend. And then I will be doing some grit and numeracy workshops in California at various school districts. So I did put a flyer out there for you guys. So check it out, all you California rock stars. I will also be speaking at CMC Central. So I hope to see you, hug your necks, and to just share some great memories with y'all. I will also be speaking at the Minnesota math conference, which is going to be in April. So I'm super excited to be there. And I will also be giving a keynote in Wisconsin. So can't wait to go there with those fabulous rock stars in Wisconsin as well. So be on the lookout. I also will be at NCSM this year, and I'm definitely hoping to go to NCTM as well. So listen, lots of love, lots of grit in the air. And I'm so excited and thrilled to just rub shoulders with all of you guys. So thanks for letting me share that with you. I also wanted to remind you guys that if you are wanting to be on this show, just simply send me your email, like through your email, send me your photo and a bio. Tell me what you want to talk about, and we'll get you slotted for the show. And of course, if you're wanting me to come to your school districts and, speak or do professional development or whatnot, I'm here for you. Just send me an email request at india.white.123@gmail.com. And of course, my website, www.india-white.com. You can check that out for books, blogs, and to schedule me for your next speaking and coaching event. Now, with that said, I am super thrilled because I want to talk about grit today, but I want to talk about it through a cultural lens because we always talk about motivating kids, but I want to talk about what if we decided to cultivate grit through compassion and cultural inclusivity with our students. So there's so many different reasons why I'm on this. Well, first off, this has been a very spicy month, Black History Month, and then we're getting ready to go into Hispanic Heritage Month, and we've got so much culture around us, and our country has grown. As we know, I've shared with you before with the National Center of Education Statistics, they've shown us that the majority of teachers are of European descent, and the majority of students are students of BIPOC diverse communities. So with that said, that means that we have to do some adjustments. Now, if we're talking about grit, we've got to help students with meeting their goals, their long-term goals. And Dr. Angela Duckworth told us that grit is having the passion and perseverance to obtain long-term goals. She's already proven and vetted that. She's helped so many people. But I like to take that idea, of course, and I turned it into my own acronym, Great Resilience in Time. And I want to spin it in an academic lens so that we could really help our students. So how can we do this? And why is grit even relevant to, cultural inclusivity and really motivating students? Well, because I'm going to tell you, when a student is in a classroom, they feel like they're the one, they're the only one, and they feel like, maybe they just don't belong because they're the minority in the classroom setting. Sometimes that's a little bit discouraging for that student. They feel like they can't really reach out, they can't really, contribute, or maybe the student is an EL or ELL student and they're learning English, they're amazingly smart, but they just are having a hard time understanding how to say it in a way that they're not going to be picked on or mocked or bullied. And so you have a sense of them feeling like they're muted, right? So how then can we motivate students through cultural inclusivity? Well, key thing is, first things first, is you want to definitely do what you can to show love to your students and let them know that they belong in your classroom. Students will definitely thrive if you convince them that they are a part of the learning environment. And so with that said, I wanted to share with you just some tips and some strategies and some, things that have worked for me in the space of education when it comes down to helping students. Now, first things first is, when you're building relationships with students, you've got to show acts of kindness. So I'm going to talk about tips for showing acts of kindness first. First things first, demonstrate kindness to students. When you're doing this, be very sensitive, especially when you're talking about cultural inclusivity, because not all students will have the same greeting. Some students will nod, some students will say namaste, some students will not look you in the eye, some students, they'll respect your sense of authority depending on their cultural upbringing, their background, their ethnicity, what's been taught in the home, what's been taught in their country. So with that said, just be very sensitive as you're implementing these steps. And another thing, see if you can offer a handshake or create a handshake with them. Some students might be a little bit timid of this, so respect their space if they're not really open to that, but just let them know that it's always on the table. And then, of course, create a comfortable physical environment for students, one where you could really lounge and, they can really thrive and they can be themselves and be unique. Because when they feel like they can be at home, like when you're at Starbucks, or my experience at University of Florida studying in their library was one of the best because it was so comfortable. Nobody bothered you, you didn't bother anybody, and it was just an unspoken norm, and it was known among us that we were all there to thrive, we were all there to learn and to get the support we needed, and it just felt like home away from home. And so hopefully your classroom is a place where students feel like it's a home away from home, so that they can continue to cultivate that trust and continue to grow and thrive, as they're going through the metacognitive process and having that comprehension and that conceptual understanding. Now, another thing is, you want to do is you want to listen to your students, because sometimes a student will hold in so much information and they'll feel like, oh, well, I can't really say anything because, I don't know if I'm going to get in trouble for this. I had a situation where I had a student who all I told him to do was just work on an assignment. I said, just get to work. And literally, when I turned like 20 seconds later to look at him, his face had turned red and he was breathing like, tears. And I'm like, whoa. So, already I'm like, okay, I know this is not me telling you to get back to your work. That is not a classroom situation, especially we had just started the class. So automatically I'm starting to think, what's going on at home? Why is this child upset? Does he have math anxiety? So I'm starting to think, okay, well, how can I empathize? How can I show him love in this? Because right now it's all about love, y'all. It really is. Valentine's Day just passed, it's love. Anyway, so I'm trying to think, how can I show this child love? And long story short, I pulled him to the side. I did not make a scene. That's another thing, teachers, is, when you are trying to help a child, do not make it feel like you are like an officer with a light bulb in their face, like ready to interrogate them. No, find casual, savvy ways to do this. So, what I did was I was like, okay, guys, let's get back to in this activity. I want you guys to work really hard for me right now on questions 4 through 10. Make sure you show your work. And then in a couple minutes, I'm going to call us back. I'm going to call some of you to the board and we'll go from there. And then as I release the class to do that, then I signaled to the child. I said, hey, come with me real quick, go outside. And I said it in a whisper so that I didn't make a scene. I'm saying this for you guys because I know you love your kids, but sometimes we might be guilty of doing things to bring shame. And that's not what we're signed up for, right? Like, we're not trying to shame our kids or make them feel embarrassed in our classroom environments. So when you're talking about building a comfortable physical environment and listening to the child, it's imperative that we use some savvy techniques like this. And so I remembered I just signaled and I was like, okay, and he knew. And so he went to the door. No big deal. Kids are still working. Nobody, because sometimes students, guys, when they know that a student is going out, everything stops. They're looking towards the door. Oh, did you see that? Like it's all this stuff. So in order to make it to where the class is still seamless, like seamlessly moving forward, then what I would do is I would just continue to say, okay, I'm going to come around and I'm going to check in about 5 minutes. So I need to make sure, you need to make sure you have everything done. I'm checking for understanding. I'm checking to see if you really understood this content. And then I keep the door partially cracked to where I can monitor the children and have a conversation with the child. And when I'm having this conversation with the child, that, shifting back to the story, the child sobbed and he just broke down. I'm talking shaking profusely. And I was just like, okay. And I just let him. I didn't say anything, guys. I just let him be human. And sometimes we have to get to that. We have to remind ourselves our students are just human. So I let him be human. I let him have his human moment. And then when he got that off of his chest, he did this. And I knew, wow, he needed that. He had been holding in so much and no one was listening to him. He went on to tell me that his parents were moving for the 4th time in the year. And he was tired of making friends, getting up and leaving, because he was all about that social interaction. And so it broke his little heart that he was going to have to leave his friends in a couple days after that setting. And so with that said, I worked out a deal with him. See, you always have to make students, you have to convince them that they're set up to win in your class. You have to set up deals so that you can create a buy-in with them. So I set up a deal and I told him, okay, here's a deal. So I want you to work on this assignment and take your time. I know everybody else is due at the end of the day. Listen, I got you. And I gave him a deal. And so we worked out a situation, and he had a certain amount that he had to finish for me, and then I was going to hold him accountable for the other amount a little later. I let him breathe a little bit. And after that, it was so sweet. It was like we had this unspoken deal, and all I had to do was just look at him. And he knew, yeah. But it was beautiful because he knew this teacher has my back. And he knew he was safe. Now, listen, when he returned back to the classroom environment after that 5 minutes or so, first things first is, before I released him back in, I didn't want to just release him and make a scene, right? So I said, okay, guys, listen, I need 4 volunteers to go up to the board, and I need someone to do number 4, number 7, number 9, number 10, right? And then, of course, let the kids go up. And then in my system, if the students did, volunteer, then they would get $20 of my fake money. Anyway, so of course, students would always go volunteer if they wanted some money. And so as the students are going up, then I would proceed and let this child in. Does that make sense? So I'm trying to help you guys with creating this physical environment and listening. And long story short, at the end of this, the child was conditioned to be back in a comfortable, safe setting. Eyes were not on him because the students were now listening and focused on the board, and everything went through smoothly. And it was a successful day. It was a successful week. And so when we take the time to listen to our kids and create a comfortable physical environment, and we get to know their situation, we get to know them, that's when we are really starting to make leeways with our students. So I want to encourage you to continue to do those strategies. Okay. Now, next thing is providing one-to-one feedback for your students, making sure that it's specific, content specific, where you're not speaking over their head. Sometimes you might have to actually give them like physical examples of what they said. I never realized, side story here, how powerful one-to-one feedback was until my teacher, Miss Wilson, shout out Miss Wilson, love you, until she provided me one-to-one feedback in, I want to say it was like my sophomore or junior year in high school. It was just, we would get back to work, and I want to say it was like pre-calculus. And instead of just like -2, -4, -6, like she actually would break it down. And then she would do these reviews on the board where she would walk out every single step, like on these problems. And then it was just like, Because when you get the paper back, you got a 70%, you're already beating yourself up like, oh man, because you didn't get the 100%, right? So when you do the review, it kind of takes away from that, oh, I'm a failure, because you realize, oh, these are just misunderstandings. These are just misconceptions that are a part of the learning progress. And guess what? I'm still on my way. I'm still making success. I'm still going somewhere. I don't have to beat myself up because I got a 70%. Now that I understand, now I can take that understanding, build on what I have coming up in the future, and then aim for higher success. It teaches you to bounce back from failure or from mistakes. It teaches you to learn from your mistakes and to cherish them when you provide one-on-one feedback. So I want to encourage you to continue to do that. And then, of course, showing respect. We're living in a situation now where students, they demand respect and they demand dignity. They're not going to take anything less. Back when we were, in school, we took whatever came to us, right? But students, not today. No, some of these students are famous. Some of these students are very wealthy. They're YouTubers, they're influencers, and they have status, and they want you to respect them. And sometimes they will come at you disrespectfully. You have to learn not to take it personally. You have to learn to just calculate it up as a part of the experience that you get of educating students and sharing your content and your knowledge, and move forward. And then, of course, be there for your students. If you're really there for your students, the word will spread, and then you will be that teacher that has a class full of students during lunch because they know you are the cool teacher on campus. And then, of course, celebrate your students. There are so many ways you can do this. You can print out little certificates of achievement. Yes, you can. And these are free. Go to the web and find certificates for achievement that are blank. And then, like, you can have the student name and then and then it's like maybe 2 or 3 lines. You can pencil in or pen in what they did for getting an 80% on the test, for getting the highest score on the quiz, for making the most gains on the academic test, for the great work you showed in the project, for getting along with your peers, for staying, having less disciplinary, like whatever it is that you want to celebrate, or doing a great job in this on the court last night, last week, whatever, whatever you want to celebrate, be specific and use it as a moment. And then, of course, you can use a money system or your ticket system to spice it up even more. Give them $20 if they get, or just celebrate all of them because they deserve to be celebrated. So those are some things that you can do as you're trying to build relationships with your students and, take it to the next level. Now, what if you're like, India, I know you're talking about building grit through cultural inclusivity. Yes, because if you do this, you are stimulating these students. You're stimulating their motivation because they feel like they belong and they get excited. They feel like they have something to prove to you. They feel like they can trust you. So now they are ready to work. Now they are comfortable. I mean, think about it. When you've had a certain professors were amazing. Shout out to Professor Wilson, because they were just comfortable, funny. You wanted to learn, you wanted to perform, you wanted to do your best. But then you had others that, I'm just going to put them in the others category. You couldn't wait to get out of their class because there was no connection. There was the cultural disconnect was there. It was just so much going on. So think about our students. They feel the same way. So do what you can to celebrate your students and get to know them. So speaking of that, talking about getting to know your students, you can ask about their culture. You can ask it in a respectful way, in a way that is not dehumanizing or mocking at all. Ask about their family. Ask about favorite activities. Ask if they play sports. And if they do show up, I tell you, I have gone to so many countless basketball games, football games, soccer games, cheerleading events, music concerts for students, just so they saw my face in the audience. Listen, personal story. I came from a very humble beginning, as we know. My parents never went to any of my performances. I was an alto saxophone player. I sang in the chorus. I made all-state chorus. I never had any parent show up for me. But my mentor, Vicky, my senior year was the first time I ever had anyone show up, and it was her. She showed up to my band jazz concert senior year, and I had a solo, and I was so nervous, y'all. I was like, OMG, she's in the audience. And in my mind, I'm like, she actually cares for me. Like, I'm not her child. She came here for me. Oh, my word. And so you got to think, how do you think your kids feel when you show up unannounced? Maybe you have a poster, maybe you're just there sitting, multitasking, grading some papers and watching them, whatever you're doing. And then they see you and you make a moment to say something to them during the basketball break or the football break, whatever. They're never going to forget that. So I want to encourage you to take advantage of that and become best friends with the basketball coach and the football coach. Yes, become best friends with them, because that is going to be your ticket to peace and student engagement for your athletes for sure. So those are some things that you can do, okay, when you're trying to cultivate grit through culture inclusivity and getting to know your students. I also want to remind you guys that as you're doing this, to acknowledge their diversity, recognize and celebrate their diverse backgrounds, experiences, and the identities particular of each student. Show them genuine interest in learning about them and their cultures, because, I mean, put yourself in their shoes. Haven't you ever had a time where you wish people knew more about you? Um, for instance, I'll share a little bit about me and my background, my cultural inclusivity. So I am, yes, I'm African American, but I'm also Nigerian, and I'm also German. I'm also Irish, and I'm also England Wales, right? So English. So, but people would never know that about me if they just looked at me surface, right? But I would love to dive into, a cultural conversation about my culture with people, because I think it'd be kind of fun. And I think you would too, and it's really neat when people do ask and people do care. It just really adds and it builds a stronger relationship. And I think as you're trying to build relationships with students and you're making that intentional effort, you will definitely start seeing the difference. So I want to encourage you to continue to do that. Also, as you're doing this and being culturally inclusive, make sure that you're using inclusive languages for your students, language that respects their gender, their identities, their cultural backgrounds, their abilities, and avoid any assumptions and stereotypes in your communication. So, if you're talking to someone, for instance, that's African American, you don't got to change up your lingo, right? Because you're talking to an African American person and try to sound, a certain way. You don't have to do that. Or, if you're talking to someone of Hispanic, descent, you don't have to try to speak Spanish and figure it all out if you don't know Spanish and then you're like butchering the language. You don't want to do that. Just be you. Just be you. Be respectful, and celebrate. The whole theme is celebrating them. Okay, you continue to celebrate them and you'll see the success. And then, of course, we talked about creating the safe place, making sure that they're supportive in your environment. They feel valued, they feel respected, they feel accepted, and that you're setting clear expectations for behavior that you'll have. Another thing I want to tap into, and I think this was really a leading piece for me, was empathy, cultivating empathy. Sometimes when you come into the education space, it's empathy is almost like a distraction, because, and I say this out of respect, you graduated, you took the test to be certified, you're now teaching students in math or whatever. You love your subject area. Like, I was a math dork. I don't know about y'all. I loved me some math, especially like linear algebra, abstract algebra. Honey, yes. Differential equations. Oh, yes. So when you're a math dork and you're going into this space, shout out to my math dorks, and you're going into the space to teach, where's your mind at? You're mathy. You're very heady, very mathy. You're not thinking about, oh my gosh, my kids actually have like real issues. You just think they all show up, buttoned up nice and everything's great, no issues. And then you get the roster and then you see the children and you interact with them and you're like, wait a second. And reality hits, and reality is much different than what we perceived when we were studying to be educators. And so, in order to balance this out, you've got to understand empathy, the importance of empathy, and how to cultivate it, because you might be that teacher to save the dream in that student, to cultivate the grit one more time. I've had so many students, I remember a student who's just coming to my mind right now, and he just shot himself in the foot, y'all. Like, he was, I think, 4 credits behind from graduating. He had gotten some trouble legally, and it just was hopeless. It looked hopeless. But I was able to cultivate his grit when I sat down and listened and empathized and saw his situation and saw that it was kind of beyond his control, some of those things that he got tangled up in. But then we created a plan and we began to goal set and we got him through. And he was very gritty for me. He had about 4 months to turn his whole life around. He did. He graduated. He enrolled in, I believe it was FIU, and he's doing a great work with his life now. And I'm very proud of him. He knows who he is if he's listening to this. And so I say that because if I didn't take the time to empathize, I don't know where he would be today. I just don't know. And you might be that person. You might be that educator, that rock star, that principal, that administrator who you might have to be the one to save that child from falling through the cracks of society. You know, you might be it. So I want to encourage you to continue to do what you know is right, supporting all students through empathy. Okay. Showing that compassion, showing that understanding for your students. And then another thing is continuing to promote cultural representation by integrating diverse perspectives and voices in the curriculum and in teaching materials. We understand that this world is now more diverse when it comes down to student population than it has been in years prior. So we have to adjust with the time. We have to adjust with the trends and what's going on. And so being able to highlight contributions from various cultural groups, ethnicities, and etc. is a beautiful way to build the dignity and the respect of all students in all cultures, avoiding any possible way of slighting, dehumanization, bullying, mocking, or any other type of biased or hateful mannerisms that could come about as we are teaching our students. So I want to encourage you with that, okay? I want to also encourage you to empower student voice. Whenever you're working with babies, make sure you're sharing their opinions, their ideas, and their feedback. So I love when you're having class conversation and they start speaking up and sharing. Find a way to weave in what they've said and to praise them. Give them a moment, like give them a moment, a spotlight moment. Like, did you hear what, student B said? Say it again. Let them say it again. And do not try to always put their words, don't always just try to say it yourself. Sometimes it's great for them to hear themselves and let them lead. You just facilitate, okay? I promise this works. And, let them say it again and say, exactly. Now, we're going to take what he just said or what she just said. We're going to build on that. What they just said, we're going to build on that. And this is the next point. And continue the conversation. Let that metacognition flow. Have those higher order thinking questions, those math, Bloom, taxonomy, math stems that are out there for us. Those are lifesavers, by the way, if you have not used Bloom's taxonomy math stems. I highly recommend. And so, just continue to do those great things, the student-led discussions. And then, of course, as you're doing all this is kind of like, as you're facilitating and going along, you need to check throughout the conversations, throughout the classroom, throughout the learning environment. Check, address any biases and stereotypes, address any misconceptions, and just continue to promote critical thinking. Now, listen, if you do have a moment where there might be a stereotype or whatnot, be sure to do what you can to correct it through an apology or through celebrating and lifting up. So, and letting students know that you won't tolerate any form of dehumanization. That's huge. They have to hear you say it. It's not enough to say, a student comes up to you and then you say, okay, I'm going to look into that, or and then you never do anything. There has to be actionable steps so that the student feels that they're safe. Because I promise you, if you never say anything or do anything, they'll remember that and they'll mark you for it. They'll say, that you can't trust that class. Don't take that teacher next year. And they'll share their experience. So in order to avoid that, continue to correct any wrongs that might have taken place. And, continue to also practice cultural humility, where you're starting to have a willingness to learn and grow about other cultures. Be willing to learn, be willing to care, continuously educate yourself about diverse cultures and perspectives, and be open to other ways of life than yours. This is a big world. We've got millions of students here. In different backgrounds, different struggles, different triumphs. So there's a lot to learn. There's a lot to experience. So I hope that you're able to really take advantage of learning about other cultures, and, just embracing it all. Because when you're doing that, that's going to really motivate them to be successful and to continue to be gritty, to continue to start over, be gritty, build on their grit, and persist, because they know that their place in your classroom is one that is secure, safe, and where they are accepted. So, with that said, guys, thanks so much for letting me share this amazing time with you as we talked about cultivating grit through compassion and cultural inclusivity in the math classroom. I'm so happy I was able to join you guys. And so, again, check out my website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for your next speaking or coaching event. Make sure that you are following me on social media whenever you get a chance. I told you my handles before. Our Facebook is Miss India White. LinkedIn is The India White. Twitter is Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram's Indy238. YouTube is India White123. TikTok is Dr. India White. So, with that said, I am so thankful for y'all. Y'all are amazing. Have a fabulous, fabulous day. Enjoy your weekend. And I will see some of you guys sooner than later. And until next time, stay gritty.